They stole me from my real family 20 years ago. The discovery that changed everything. I found the letter by accident. That's always how the truth comes out, isn't it? Never when you're looking for it. Always when you're doing something completely ordinary, and then suddenly your entire world tilts. I was cleaning out my mother's desk. Not my biological mother. That word still feels strange in my mouth even now. My mom. The woman who raised me, who braided my hair, who stayed up with me when I was sick, who told me every single day that I was wanted, that I was chosen, that I was loved. That mom. She had been struggling with her memory for about a year. Nothing dramatic, just small things. Forgetting where she put her keys, asking me the same question twice in one conversation. My dad suggested a checkup. The doctor said it was probably stress, maybe early signs of something we should monitor. My parents had always been cautious, so they decided to start organizing important documents just in case. I volunteered to help. The desk was mahogany, old and elegant, something my mom had inherited from her own mother. It had a small key that unlocked a drawer at the top, the kind of drawer that always feels like it holds secrets. I found the key in a ceramic pot on her bookshelf. Inside, beneath old insurance policies and birth certificates, there was a manila envelope worn at the edges, with my name written on it in handwriting I didn't recognize. My name. Not important documents. Not for Sarah. Just my name, Sarah. The handwriting was shaky, almost desperate. The envelope was sealed with old tape that crumbled when I touched it. I remember hesitating. I remember my hands actually trembling as I opened it. Inside was a letter. Yellow paper, creased and folded many times, like it had been read, refolded and read again. The date on the top was 20 years ago, the month I was born. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone, or I'm too far away to ever reach you. I don't know which. Both terrify me equally. My name is Margaret Chen. You don't know me, but I am your mother, your real mother. And I need you to know the truth about how you came to be with the family you're with now. I couldn't breathe. Not in a dramatic gasping way, in a still, frozen way where your lungs just stop working, and your brain can't process oxygen anymore. I read it again. The words didn't change. The letter went on to describe a hospital in Portland, a birth that went wrong, a baby, me, taken from her arms by a nurse, a man and a woman she'd never seen before being led into the recovery room while she was still bleeding, still drugged, still barely conscious. The nurses saying something about a private arrangement, a transfer. The couple, a man with silver hair and a woman with kind eyes, taking me away, my adoptive parents. Except that wasn't what I was told. I'd been told they went through a legitimate adoption agency, that my biological mother was a teenager who couldn't afford to raise a child, that I was given up for adoption willingly, legally, with papers signed by everyone involved. This letter described something very different. This letter described kidnapping. I sat on the floor, my back against the desk, reading those yellowed pages over and over. My mother, Margaret Chen, had written about trying to find me. Years of searching, private investigators, dead ends. The adoption records sealed by the courts, hidden behind laws designed to protect privacy. Her desperation growing with each passing year. She wrote about the other children who were taken the same way she suspected I was. Children from immigrant families, from poor families, from families the system didn't protect. She wrote about a pattern, a network, something bigger than just her loss. And then the letter ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if she'd been interrupted or had run out of time to write. Please know that I never stopped looking for you. Please know that I loved you from the moment I felt you kick inside me. Please know that whatever life you've been given, whatever family you're with, I need you to. The sentence cut off. There was no closure, no explanation for what she needed me to know. Just nothing. I sat there for hours, I think. Time felt broken. I read the letter so many times that the words started to blur together. I read it until I had it memorized. I read it until I was shaking with something between rage and grief and confusion. I didn't confront my parents that day. I couldn't. I went back to the desk and carefully, deliberately searched for more. There had to be more. There had to be an explanation from them, some document that would make sense of this nightmare. And I found it. Tucked behind the back panel of the drawer, which I only discovered because my hands were shaking so badly I knocked the entire drawer content onto the floor, was a folder. Inside were adoption papers. Completely legitimate, completely official, completely legal. dated 6 days after I was born. But the adoption agency listed on the papers had been shut down by the federal government in 1998. The website didn't exist anymore. The address led to an empty lot. The agency had been investigated for what the old news articles called irregular practices in private adoptions. It was a euphemism. I found the real articles later. The agency had been run by a man named Dr. Robert Fenimore, who had connections to hospitals across the Pacific Northwest. Nurses had reported strange practices, birth mothers claiming their babies were taken without proper consent, records being falsified, adoptions being processed through private arrangements that bypassed the normal legal channels. The man who had founded the agency, the man who had arranged my adoption, had died in prison in 2003, serving a sentence for fraud. But not for kidnapping. Never for kidnapping. The cases were too tangled, too many families involved, too much institutional complicity. I spent that night in a daze, my entire identity fractured. The parents who raised me, who I loved, who I trusted completely, had either knowingly participated in kidnapping or had been defrauded so completely that they didn't realize what they were part of. Either way, I was the product of a crime. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I needed to call them. I needed to ask them questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. But first I did something I thought would be impossible. I searched for Margaret Chen. The search results were sparse. But one thing came up. An obituary from 3 years ago. Margaret Chen, 71, passed away after a long battle with cancer. She left behind no children, no grandchildren, no legacy but a desperate letter hidden in a drawer. She was dead. The woman who gave birth to me, who spent 20 years searching for me, who wrote that letter hoping someday I would find it. She was dead, and I would never get to tell her that I found it, that I understood, that I believed her. That night, I made a choice. I called my parents. I told them I was coming over. They seemed confused. It was late. I sounded strange. My mom asked if I was okay. I told her I would explain when I got there. I sat in my car outside their house for 10 minutes, trying to breathe, trying to organize my thoughts into something that wasn't just raw, bleeding rage. Then I went inside to confront the only family I'd ever known about the fundamental lie they'd built my life upon. Part 2. The confrontation and the truth. My parents were sitting in the living room when I walked in. The TV was playing some cooking show, the volume low, and they both turned to look at me with expressions of mild concern. My dad, Robert, I had to stop myself from thinking of him as the man they called my father, was reading a newspaper. My mom was working on a crossword puzzle. They looked so ordinary, so gentle, so completely unaware that their world was about to collapse. "Hi, sweetheart," my mom said, smiling. "You look upset. Did something happen?" I sat down in the chair across from them, the letter and the adoption papers in my hands. My whole body was vibrating with the effort of not screaming. "I found something today," I said, my voice steady in a way that felt like it didn't belong to me. "I found it in your desk, Mom, while I was organizing like you asked." My mother's expression shifted. I watched her carefully. She seemed confused, but not surprised. Not guilty, just confused. I held up the letter. "Do either of you know what this is?" My dad set down his newspaper. He took off his reading glasses and looked at me with an intensity that made me want to look away. But I didn't. "Sarah, where did you find that?" he asked, his voice very quiet. "In the desk in the drawer with the key. There's also an adoption file. And I've done some research, and I need you to explain to me why my adoption papers are from an agency that was shut down by the federal government for fraud and irregular practices." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mom put down her crossword puzzle very carefully. She looked at my dad. Some wordless communication passed between them, the kind that happens after 50 years of marriage. Then my mom started to cry. "We did what we thought was right," she whispered. "We were told it was legal. We were told it was proper." "Who told you?" I demanded. "Who was the person who told you that kidnapping a baby from her mother was proper?" "We didn't kidnap you," my dad said, standing up, his voice rising. "Sarah, we didn't know." "You didn't know?" I stood up too, my voice now sharp enough to cut. "You didn't know that the woman in the hospital was sedated? That the papers were forged? That there was no legitimate adoption process?" My mom was sobbing now, her small frame hunched over. "We were told you were an unwanted baby, a mother who couldn't care for you. We paid money, yes, but we were told it was legal fees, processing costs. We were told everything was above board. How much money? I asked. $40,000, my dad said quietly. In 1983, we were told it was the cost of a private adoption. The amount was almost irrelevant. The money just made it more real. They had purchased me. Whether they knew it or not, they had participated in a transaction that separated a mother from her newborn child. I found a letter, I said, holding up Margaret Chen's yellowed pages. From my biological mother. She wrote about being sedated after giving birth, about waking up to find me gone, about spending 20 years trying to find me, and you never looked. You never questioned the paperwork. You just took the baby and moved on with your lives. My mother looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. We loved you, Sarah. From the moment we brought you home, we loved you with everything we had. That doesn't change what happened, I said, but my voice cracked. The truth was, I wasn't sure it didn't change things. Love and crime aren't mutually exclusive. They can exist in the same space, tangled and impossible to separate. I spent that night in their house listening to their versions of the story. They had been unable to conceive. After years of trying, of failed fertility treatments, of heartbreak, they had gone to a lawyer who recommended Dr. Fenimore's private adoption service. The lawyer, who had since retired and moved to Arizona, my dad remembered, had assured them it was the fastest, most discreet way to adopt. He had connected them with Dr. Fenimore, who had several available babies. I was one of those available babies. My parents had been too desperate to question the process. They had been too eager to become parents to worry about the legal details. They had been, they admitted, naive. Before we continue, we would like to thank all of you who support us by subscribing, liking, and sharing our content. The only appreciation we ask of you is that you subscribe. Like and share this video if you are not yet one of our subscribers. Thank you. Do you know what happened to her? My mom asked. To Margaret? I told them she was dead, that she had searched for me for 20 years and then died of cancer, that she had left that letter in the hope that one day I would find it and understand that I was wanted, that I was loved, that I was stolen. My father literally fell to his knees. He wept in a way I'd never seen a man weep before. Not theatrical, not performative, just utterly, devastatingly broken. I called a family lawyer the next day. The legal situation was complicated. My parents weren't criminals. Dr. Fenimore and the network of corrupt professionals were. But they had benefited from a crime, even if unknowingly. The adoption was technically invalid, which meant I had no legal status as their child, which meant I also had no legal claim to their inheritance or their name. The lawyer explained that I could pursue civil litigation against the estate of Dr. Fenimore, though it was long past the statute of limitations for most claims. I could also try to access my sealed adoption records, though that would require court approval and would be difficult. What I wanted was something different. I wanted to know more about Margaret Chen. I wanted to honor the woman who had searched for me. I wanted to understand the life I could have had. The internet made that easier than I expected. I found an article about Dr. Fenimore's network in a historical database. There were dozens of children who had been taken. Some families had been reunited in the 90s, after the agency was shut down. But many hadn't. I found a support group for people in my situation, adoptees from the Fenimore network. There were 17 of us still alive. 17 children who had been stolen and placed with families, most of them unwittingly complicit. I reached out to them. And slowly, I began to understand that I wasn't alone in this fractured identity. I wasn't alone in feeling betrayed by the people who loved me. I wasn't alone in grieving for a mother I never got to know. My relationship with my adoptive parents changed after that night. The unconditional trust I had was shattered, but something else took its place. It was more fragile, more tentative, but maybe more honest. We saw each other not as idealized versions, but as complex human beings who had all been victims of a system designed to hide truth. My mom started seeing a therapist. My dad tracked down the lawyer who had connected them with Dr. Fenimore, confronted him, and helped gather evidence that eventually led to a documentary about the Fenimore network and the families it destroyed. I pursued the court records. I was able to access Margaret Chen's file, which contained some information about my biological family. I learned I had a half-sister, also adopted by a different family, also part of the network. We found each other through an adoption registry, and we've been slowly building a relationship. It's strange and fragmented, but it's real. I changed my name legally. I'm still Sarah, but now I also carry Margaret's surname, Chen. I am Sarah Chen, And I am also Sarah with the family that raised me. I am both stolen and chosen, both betrayed and loved, both a victim of a crime and a person who built a life. The hardest part is accepting that there's no simple ending to this story. I can't undo the kidnapping. I can't bring Margaret back. I can't give my adoptive parents absolution for participating in a crime, even unknowingly. But I can honor all the parts of this fractured truth. Sometimes the deepest wounds come not from what was done to us, but from the realization that the people we loved participated in our pain. And sometimes, healing means learning to love them anyway, while also honoring the person they couldn't give us the chance to know. I keep Margaret's letter in a frame on my desk. I read it when I'm struggling with the contradiction of loving the people who raised me while grieving the mother I never got to meet. And I whisper to her, across the 20 years and the distance and the death that separates us. I know now. I know that I was wanted. I know that I was loved. I know that you never stopped looking for me. And even though I found you too late, I'm so glad I found you at all.